There are 153 million children around the world that need a place to call home. If you took the population of children and put them in a country by themselves, that country's population would be ranked 9th in the world, being larger than Russia. Why is that number so big, and why aren't more people adopting? The sheer amount of money that it costs to adopt could be the answer to both of those questions. Adoption should be more affordable for those who can financially raise a child, but can't afford the initial fees required. 1 out of 42 Americans are adopted, and if you compare that to Clemson's population, that would mean around 462 students are adopted. Personally, I have family who's gone through the adoption process, and I've seen firsthand the amount of money, time, and effort that it takes to adopt. And with the inability to have children of their own, adoption was one of their few, if not their only option. Today, we're going to look at why adoption is so expensive, why the process can be complicated, and ways that those issues can be resolved. First, let's look at why adoption is expensive and why the process can be complicated. Believe it or not, adoption, on average, costs more than childbirth. According to Jeff Williams from the U.S. News on October 2nd, 2014, an average middle-aged couple whose baby was born last year can expect to spend over $245,000 to raise the child, not including paying for college. And if you're planning to adopt, you may end up spending an extra $40,000. In addition to that, adopting families are going to end up paying for more fees than people who are biologically having a child. Marika Oy from BBC News on February 13, 2015, stated that for parents to biologically have a child, they would have to pay for things such as the delivery and hospital bills, which can end up costing anywhere around $8,000 to $32,000. In comparison to that, an author from the Adoption Network in 2018 stated how private U.S. newborn adoption costs often range from $35,000 to $50,000, and adopting parents must be prepared to pay for expenses such as adoption professional service fees, marketing networking expenses to find a birth mother, and so much more. And these costs can vary due to what adoption agency you use or what the birth mother may require. And when it comes to international adoption agencies, it varies in cost, but sometimes it's the same, if not more. Speaking of international adoption agencies, they have a tendency to make the adoption process more complicated and longer than it needs to be. The authors of the International Studies Quarterly in September 2015 wrote how in the child's country of origin, prospective parents often encounter inefficient or even corrupt bureaucracy and opaque legal requirements that make the adoption process longer and more difficult to complete. Now that we've looked at some issues that arise when it comes to the expenses or the process of adoption, let's look at some ways that these issues can be resolved. Adoption agencies should utilize methods to make the adoption process easier and not as difficult on adopting families. And one way that they can do this is by speeding up the process, because the longer that the process is drawn out, the more expensive it's going to end up being, and the higher the risk of the adoption falling through. The Adoption Network in 2018 stated that on average, wait times can last anywhere from a few months to a couple of years, with international adoptions usually taking the longest. My family who went through the adoption process, they ended up waiting 2 years before even finding a birth mother to adopt from. And with that said, the authors of the Social Service Review wrote in December 2006 how speeding up the adoption process may increase the likelihood of adoption. Another solution is by changing the consent and revocation periods, which are times where the birth mother can change her mind about the adoption altogether. And these consent and revocation periods vary state by state, and that should be changed to where it's made the same across the nation, as well as shortened in time. An author from the Jennifer Fairfax website in 2018 stated how the laws can change frequently by the legislature, and they can be different within the same state depending on whether the adoption is an agency or private adoption, and which state law applies to the particular adoption impacts which consent and revocation laws apply. These laws varying state by state just makes it more difficult on the adopting parents, and in the long run, just more expensive. One final solution is by changing the payment methods that the adopting parents have to go through, in which they shouldn't have to pay for the whole process until it's 100% complete, and the cost should also be financially suitable for families of different backgrounds. The Adoption Network mentioned before in 2018 said that as long as the adopting parents are safe, financially stable, and able to parent the child successfully, they will be able to do so. These changes in adoption agencies will work because it will encourage families who may have strayed away from adoption due to the expense or the complication of the process to go and adopt. The authors of the Social Service Review in December 2006 wrote that policies that target adoption processes are designed to improve the chances a child will leave placement via adoption. With these improvements intact, hopefully the rate of child adoption will increase in years to come. Today we're able to see why adoption is so expensive, why the process can be complicated, and ways that those issues can be resolved. Adoption should be more affordable for those who can financially raise a child but can't afford the initial fees required. Maybe someday, with those changes intact, those 153 million children around the world will finally find a place to call home.